I do apologize for the delay in the release of our Arena Football Weekly uh, episode for week 2, but unfortunately, here where I live, we had a tornado. I have been without power for a couple of days, and it has just been absolutely chaotic. But maybe not as chaotic as the Arena Football League's been going through lately. Hello and welcome to Arena Football Weekly presented by the World of Football. I am your host, Adam Snow, and I want to thank every single one of you out there who checked out last week's video, all the support, the likes, the comments. I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you guys are coming back for more. I like doing the videos despite all the problems the Arena League has been having as of late. Uh, kind of makes me wish I was doing UFL videos instead, but here we are. We're going to try to follow the Arena League all the way through till their championship game if they get that far, but we shall see. Before we go any further, I do want to quickly plug that we here at the World of Football do a couple of podcasts. The first being This Week in the World of Football, hosted by my father, Randy, and myself. We talk about everything in the world of football, from the Arena Football League, the NFL, CFL, Liga de Football American down there in Mexico, Women's Football Alliance. We talk about as much football as we possibly can on that show. We release those every Tuesday when there is not a tornado or bad weather. So please go over there and check that out. And I also do a podcast with my brother-in-law, Kyle, called Just Lying Around, a Detroit Lions podcast, where you guessed it, we talk about the Detroit Lions. So if that's your thing, go over there. That one we release whenever there's some big Lions news. So we hope you guys go over there and check that out too. Kyle puts a lot of work into those shows, so we appreciate him here at the World of Football. Now, so much has happened since last week. Let's not waste any time. We're going to start off this week's show by recapping all of the scores and standings following the Week 2 action. The Albany Firebirds advanced to 2-0 on the season with a 51-41 victory against the Nashville Cats. The name from the game that you should all be aware of is Firebirds wideout Darius Prince, who had 10 receptions in the game for 142 yards and a whopping 5 touchdowns. The Southwest Kansas Storm handled their business in their home opener against the Iowa Rampage 34-18 to secure their first win of the season. The Oregon Black Bears made a big statement at home, putting on a scoring frenzy over the Georgia Force 63-24. The West Texas Desert Hawks went down to Orlando to ruin the Predators' home opener 30-14 in a defensive battle that saw only 6 points scored in the first half. The Billings Outlaws looked like one of the premier teams in the AFL, going into Washington and having their way with the Wolfpack 49-12. The Minnesota Myth hosted their first home game of the season against the Philadelphia Soul and came out with a 47-12 victory. The Salina Liberty and Wichita Regulators game that was supposed to play Monday night was postponed due to weather and is scheduled to play at a later date. Meanwhile, the Rapid City Marshals and New Orleans Voodoo were given byes this past week. And here's a look at your standings through the first 2 weeks of the Arena Football League season. There are currently 6 unbeaten teams out of the 16-team league and 6 winless teams. All right, guys, now let's get to the news of the week. And yes, there was so much news. I may or may not be able to touch everything. We'll see how this goes. So if I forget something, don't crucify me in the comments. We're going to do the best we can here. The first and biggest item is the Iowa Rampage folding after only one game. And yes, while they did play their second game against the Southwest Kansas Storm, there's a lot of moving parts to that situation. So they announced they're folding via press release, which apparently all the players and staff found out at like the exact same time, which is pretty messed up. They had an agreement with Southwest Kansas and apparently with the league to get the team to play that game so that another team wouldn't have to miss the weekend game. So it sounds like via an interview from Arena Insider with Iowa Rampage player Tamatoa Silva, I hope I'm saying that right, who kind of went into some of that in that interview. It is a good interview. You should go to Arena Insider to check out that interview. We're going to be talking about Arena Insider a couple more times throughout the show, so we'll get to that. But in that interview, he kind of explains that it was Southwest Kansas who sent a bus out to pick up the guys for Iowa, brought them to the game, bust them back. Really classy move by Southwest Kansas. And it does stink to hear of a team folding only 2 weeks into the season. There's just been so many problems riddled with this iteration of the Arena League. It is really disappointing to see. And we will probably tackle some of the other issues that there's going to be a theme, I feel like, in this episode, as a lot of promises were made by the league, or the accusations that the league made a bunch of promises that they didn't keep. It sucks. It sucks to see a team fold. You got to feel for those guys, those players, that whole staff, that community who was like ready to support this team, and just have it all kind of, after 2 weeks, it's just, you're done. It's really disappointing. And while when they first announced the Rampage, or the Iowa Rampage, I wasn't going to be a fan of them, because I love my Grand Rapids Rampage, and they were the only Rampage for me in the Arena Football League. And while I didn't want this team to succeed, I didn't want it to go like this. I feel for those guys, and like, if you watch that interview that Arena Insider did, it does break your heart a little bit that these guys are just here to play, and they were made promises that weren't kept, and it's very unfortunate. Another thing I wanted to talk about is there's some stuff from the Nashville-Albany game, where, for instance, somebody on Twitter, Spring Football Zone, noticed that the game ball was different for the game. They went from their, the league colored ball, the ball that everybody was supposed to use, to a different Wilson football during the game. And this came to light through a radio show in the Albany area called Levack and Gaz, off of the Fox Sports Radio. That's what it is. And Jeff Levack is, in fact, not only a co-host of this show, he is also the team president for the Albany Firebirds. So he shed a lot of light in one of his segments during his show last week. And, he's been doing arena segments all week long. I think once traction started hitting, when, he was talking about that, they made it a more regular topic, I suppose. I have just started listening to him. It's a good show. Go check him out. But he talked about how their organization, their team, their players didn't like the official footballs. Apparently nobody in the league did, and they have since decided to change the footballs. I don't know if every team's going to do it, but the Firebirds requested before the game to go to these other Wilson footballs, which was, I guess, a more comparable football they liked a little more. And supposedly the other owners and teams wanted to change the ball by the end of the season, or at the end of the season. But so Albany was like, why not just do it now? And so they played with that football, but they also had to get Nashville's okay about it. And apparently Nashville pushed back on using the footballs, but ended up agreeing and liking it. So all's well that ends well, I guess. I mean, as long as you like the football, who cares? You'd think that would have been something they would have ran by a bunch of teams and players before just coming up with a ball deal, huh? But another story that kind of came out of his conversation, or him talking about that game, was how the Nashville Cats didn't want to play Ironman rules. They wanted to play indoor rules, and I think that blew up a little bit. Just listening to that conversation, I just wasn't sure of the context, if they meant like for that game that they wanted to do indoor football rules, or if they just for that game didn't want to do Ironman rules. I get that there's a whole learning process throughout the league, and it's, I get it. There's going to be messy stuff here or there. We had week 1 where they didn't follow overtime rules, and it sounds like the Cats were still kind of struggling with the ins and outs of the Ironman rules. I'm not 100% sure there, but that was thrown out there as well. And then on the Monday show for Levack and Gaz, they did announce that the Firebirds will host the Minnesota Myth, because the Myth's venue, the Target Center there in Minnesota, is going to be hosting the NBA playoffs. So because of scheduling with that, the Myth had to change their game to an away game at Albany. And so when this happened, what I think is cool here is that the Albany organization said that any season ticket holders for the Firebirds would be able to get tickets at 50% off for like their whole purchase, which I think is pretty cool, especially for a last minute, like, hey, in a week we got a game, and we know this wasn't on your original schedule or part of your original season ticket holder deal. So if you're a season ticket holder, we'll give you 50% off to buy whatever tickets you want for this game. So hopefully that ends up working. So speaking of scheduling changes, we have adjusted week 3 schedule, which is going to go as follows. Saturday, the Billings Outlaws will travel to Rapid City to play the Marshals. On Sunday, the Oregon Black Bears will go to Washington to play the Wolfpack. Originally, Oregon was supposed to have a home game. Also on Sunday, Salina will travel to Nashville. And then on Monday, the Minnesota Myth will travel to Albany. We already talked about that. And then Southwest Kansas will go to Wichita to play the Regulators. And that means that there are 5 teams left playing that are on bye. So Iowa is gone and doesn't count. So you've got the Philadelphia Soul, the New Orleans Voodoo, the Louisiana Voodoo, uh, the Orlando Predators, West Texas Desert Hawks, and the Georgia Force will all have byes this upcoming week. One of these teams, the West Texas Desert Hawks, uh, it's interesting that they are now put on bye, especially after a judge granted the National Arena League's injunction against the Desert Hawks. The Desert Hawks did release a statement saying that they were all good. It was there's no way that this was going to come to pass, essentially, and it's all legal mumbo jumbo, and they'll be fine. They're going to be ready to play their game. Even their head coach put out a tweet or an X, whatever you want to call it, about them playing this weekend and guaranteeing it. And I guess that tweet has since been taken down because they are no longer playing a game. Uh, just very interesting that happened. And then obviously with the Voodoo, we already talked about them having their second straight bye week. Head coach James Shiver did a 2-part interview with Arena Insider. We're going to mention them again. It is a very interesting interview, a lot of insight on kind of the the Louisiana Voodoo's move from Lake Charles to Lafayette and dealing with all that. It's very fascinating stuff, putting together a game in a new arena in a week and talking about, yes, those poor nets that we were all criticizing him for. It's just a very interesting interview. And he goes on, there's some conspiracy theories he has about the commissioner, trying to keep New Orleans from competing because they put together the best team. I don't know if that's 100% true. It's a conspiracy theory, but he threw it out there, and it's I won't say it's hard to unsee, but it's just fascinating to me that that was thrown out there. Also in the interview, he mentions that Arena Football League CEO Travell Gaines resigned from his position. I don't know if that's been officially announced by the league or not. That's just a very interesting development that came out of that interview there. And, I would recommend anybody, if you got the time, check out this interview. It's very interesting, very fascinating. So go over to Arena Insider, check that one out. And we are not done with them. Because also they had on their show this week, Stephen Titus, the owner of the Billings Outlaws, who went on that show, as well as another show from the Rapid City market called the Nate Brown Show, where he talked a lot of similar stuff between, the two shows, but essentially covering issues with the league front office, and it's talking about how Commissioner Lee Hutton's got to go. And so a lot of that's been getting the traction, getting the rounds, getting the quotes everybody's been talking about. And, what I do dig about, Stephen Titus here is that, he just kind of laid it out there. I felt like he was very honest, very open, and it's very evident that, he's very passionate about his Billings Outlaws. And the Outlaws look like a very well-run team, and that's what I take from that. Another owner also spoke out this week, and that's Rapid City Marshals co-owner Wes Johnson, who also appeared on that same Nate Brown show this week and talked about just trying to get fans out there to support their team because they're not getting the support from the league. Even the official Rapid City Marshals Twitter account put a statement out there criticizing the league, the league's management. It's just absolutely crazy, some of the stuff that's happening. And then he also went on KOTA Territory ABC, a local station out there, to talk about the upcoming game this weekend and to again reiterate getting rid of Lee Hutton as the commissioner. But then we got the juicy nugget of these owners, even if they are all unhappy with what the commissioner is doing, and clearly no fans are even a fan of Lee Hutton right now, but apparently they can't vote him out. It doesn't matter if none of them like him. The way the structure of the league is, the league is a private, I forget the exact terminology, but the way the league is set up, it is like a private company or a private entity, and therefore the owners can't just oust him. It's a very interesting development to this whole thing. It's been very, it now makes sense why he hasn't been booted out by these owners, because there seems to be a lot of good, capable owners, maybe some not so capable owners. But it's clear that, we might have to be stuck with Lee Hutton. I don't want to say he can't get the job done, but I mean, we're 2 weeks in and it has just been an absolute circus, dumpster fire, whatever you want to call it. It has just been nightmarish. And that leads me into, where is Commissioner Lee Hutton? I mean, he was supposed to do that appearance on the Arena Football League podcast, the official podcast of the league, that we're all looking forward to checking out the interview, getting some answers, getting some clarity is all we wanted. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of people with their pitchforks and torches ready to go. But I just wanted some clarity because it wasn't unsalvageable. And I mean, as much bad stuff has happened, and I know people might disagree with me here, but it's still salvageable. It's just, it's clearly not pretty. And they've already done so much damage. But it would be nice to have some clarity. So where is Lee Hutton right now? He's clearly still talking to some of the owners. They're still getting word from him, but he's not made any public, statements or anything. And it's just very odd to me that he'd be so silent amongst all these issues. Like, what does he think? You know, I know at one point he did an interview where he talked about, you know, uh, if we're radio silent, that means we're just doing a lot behind the scenes. Well, right now, I think the radio silence is pretty damning and pretty much is not helping his case. If there's anything to, you know, say to salvage what's happening, you got to come out and say it. I mean, keeping everybody in the dark it is not helping the situation, and it is very frustrating as an arena football fan to see that happening. As a fan of the Minnesota Myth this year, I was looking forward to them. They've been canceling their games, on streaming, so you can't even stream the games. It's been so irritating. There's one person I would like to thank for keeping us up to date on all the arena football stuff happening there in the Target Center for that Myth Soul game, and that's at LG Brandon B on X. I just want to give him a little bit of a shout out. He was posting pictures, updating the score because they canceled that stream, so it was great to have at least a little bit of knowledge of what was happening during this game. And he clearly uncovered, whether he knows it or not, I think he uncovered where Lee Hutton's been hiding, and it might just be in one of the worst mascot costumes I have ever seen. Look at that atrocious thing. And another thing from this game, really quick, before we wrap up this whole weekly episode, is what is up with those Nets in Minnesota? I thought for sure if the commissioner's wife owned this team, and this is the team I'm rooting for, I thought for sure they would have the best Nets in the league. They would have, the best everything, because the owner would want to put as much into his own team or his wife's own team as possible. And woof, those are some terrible Nets. Just going to throw that out there. And one of the worst mascots out there. And it's just, and apparently they haven't been marketing this team very well, because I mean, not a whole lot of people showed up in that beautiful Target Center. It's just disappointing to see. So yeah, it's another rough week for the Arena Football League. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes going forward. It does suck that we don't know week to week what the games are going to be. We here at the World of Football, Dad and I, we're supposed to go to a Myth game in a couple weeks, and I believe they just changed the start time for that game. Who knows if that game will even end up happening now? It stinks being a fan and trying to plan out, going to some of these games and not knowing if it's actually going to get played or not. The league is lacking stability, and that clearly does start from the top. I mean, I get it. Lee Hutton's getting so much hate, and I think it's well-deserved hate. But I implore the commissioner to just, come out and say something. I get it. You're going to probably be the bad guy for a while. But you can start doing things and making things clearer for us fans to at least understand, and maybe start nudging us in the opposite direction and righting this ship. Otherwise, some of these other owners have suggested having Jeff Fisher, the president of the Nashville Cats team, take over as commissioner and right the ship and get this thing back on track. I just want what's best for this league. And unfortunately, right now, I don't know if it's Lee Hutton or not. Clearly, we've had enough bumps in the road that you would be inclined to say, yeah, he's not the guy. But I am a little bit of an optimist. I hope he can turn things around. I don't want the league to just tank and go south. But it's trending in that direction, unfortunately. And I hope he comes up with the right decision for the betterment of this league. I just want us to have some answers. And I feel bad for the gentleman who covers the Arena Football League podcast, who hosts that show. I know a lot of people were gunning at him for not giving them answers. And guys, he works for the league. He's got to essentially, do what the league tells him to cover, and he can only say so much. And we got to be a little more careful around stuff like that. I get it. We're all mad. We want the best product that we can get. And the fact that we're not is very frustrating. So, hey, be kind out there, Arena fans. I get it. It's not the best time in Arena Football League history, but at least we have Arena Football. That's about the best bright side I can bring to this conversation. And with that, we're going to wrap up this week's episode. I hope you guys, still can find some of these games. I hope we can too. Arena Football or arenafootball.live for the live streams. I think there still should be games on Vire. Not even 100% sure. I wish the league would make that a little more clear. But I would also like some stats. Why are we not getting like nice compiled stats, Arena Football League? I would love to at least look at a box score for every game. And I can't even do that. There's so much that this league's got to figure out. I get it, it's a brand new league, and there's so many issues, but you guys got to start trending in the right direction. Otherwise, I don't know who's going to care about the Arena Football League anymore, and that sucks because I love this. I mean, look, I got the video games, I got the merch. I love the Arena Football League, and let's hope that next week's a better week. So until then, guys, I've been Adam Snow again, and we'll see you next week, hopefully, if there's games. And before we wrap up this video, there is a little bit of breaking news as I edit this video. From inside the arena, the Georgia Force have become the third team to end their season, along with the Philadelphia Soul. Heartbreaking news, 2 more teams fall to the wayside in the Arena Football League as we await official Arena Football League announcements for those 2. So I guess take that with a grain of salt as we go into this weekend's slate of games.